The gleaming spires of the unified Galactic Academy of Military Excellence sparkled like jewels against the azure sky of Centauri Prime. Maya Chen shielded her eyes as she stepped from the transport shuttle, the planet's intense sunlight reflecting off the polished white stone of the Academy buildings. Around her, 4 other humans gathered their belongings, all of them trying not to gawk at the architectural marvel that would be their home for the next 3 years. "It's bigger than the briefing holos showed," Jackson Reed muttered, the former Special Forces operative automatically scanning for defensible positions and exit routes. Habits he couldn't shake despite the peaceful setting. Commander Xilvax, the Academy's 8-limbed Arcturian headmaster, observed the newest cadets from a balcony overlooking the landing pad. His compound eyes narrowed at the sight of the 5 humans among the various species disembarking. "Deathworlders," he chittered quietly to his assistant. Their inclusion was politically motivated. Note their muscle density and alertness. Typical predator behaviors. The assistant's antennae quivered in acknowledgement. "Do you believe they can integrate with the other species, Commander?" "Unlikely. Their planetary classification alone will isolate them. Category 12 Deathworlders rarely understand the concept of strategic patience." Below, unaware of this assessment, the humans made their way through the Grand Atrium, where representatives from 23 sapient species gathered in orientation groups. Diego Reyes, the communications specialist, noticed the subtle shifts as other beings created distance around them. "They're watching us again," Diego muttered, his translator device carefully modulated to prevent eavesdropping. 3 o'clock, that Vordax cluster is literally vibrating when they look our way. "Let them," Maya replied with a slight smile. "They've never seen anything like us before." Amara Okafor, her fingers already itching to examine the advanced technology surrounding them, shrugged her shoulders. "Can you blame them? Earth's gravity alone makes us look like heavy worlders to half these species." Sven Lindholm, the tallest of the group at 6'4", nodded toward a delicate crystalline being that chimed musically as it floated past. "That one's from Tyrell. Their homeworld has 1/5 Earth gravity and no weather variations. We probably seem like monsters." The first week of orientation confirmed their outsider status. The Academy's curriculum emphasized careful calculation, methodical planning, and acceptance of statistical inevitabilities, qualities well suited to species that evolved on stable, predictable worlds. The humans, products of Earth's chaotic environment, excelled at individual assessments but frustrated their instructors. Cadet Chen sighed, her tactical theory instructor, after a simulation. "While your solution achieved the objective, your resource expenditure was highly inefficient. Victory at such cost is tantamount to failure." Maya had bitten back her instinctive response, that in her solution, everyone survived. The instructor seemed more concerned with preserving equipment than personnel. As the term progressed, the divide deepened. The humans scored top marks in crisis simulations, but were penalized for unnecessary risk and resource inefficiency. Their isolation grew until Commander Xilvax announced the final assessment: the legendary siege of Kaldar simulation. "This year," he announced with a flick of his mandibles that humans had learned signified satisfaction, "all teams will face the ultimate test of strategic patience and resource management, a scenario that has humbled cadets for a century." When the assignments were posted, the 5 humans discovered they had been grouped together, separated from the integrated teams that were supposed to be the Academy's hallmark. Jackson's jaw tightened. "They're setting us up to fail." Maya studied the briefing document, her eyes reflecting something the others recognized immediately: not resignation, but opportunity. "No," she said quietly. "They're giving us exactly what we need. A chance to show them what humans really are." The Academy's grand amphitheater hummed with anticipation as hundreds of cadets from across the galaxy filed in for the Kaldar simulation briefing. The humans arrived early, securing seats near the front, a tactical decision Maya had insisted on. The vast chamber, designed to accommodate beings of wildly different physiologies, featured adaptive seating that morphed to support everything from the gelatinous Mraxi to the silicon-based Ceruleans. Commander Xilvac stepped onto the central platform, his exoskeleton gleaming under the precisely calibrated lights. With a wave of one clawed appendage, he activated the holographic display, and a detailed rendering of a fortified outpost materialized above the assembly. Kaldar Outpost, he announced, his translator conveying his clicking speech into standard galactic. A mining colony and research station established in the Epsilon Sector 142 standard years ago. In the historical siege that inspires our simulation, 3,000 enemy combatants surrounded 500 civilians and 50 defenders for 92 days. The hologram shifted to show waves of attackers bombarding the outpost's shields while orbital forces prevented evacuation. Jackson leaned forward, his military experience allowing him to instantly identify the tactical weaknesses in the outpost's design. The real defenders, continued Xilvac with undisguised pride, saved 46% of the civilians and preserved critical research at the cost of the outpost itself. In our simulation, no team has ever exceeded 60% civilian survival. A ripple of murmurs passed through the multi-species audience. The Vordak's hive mind collective to their left buzzed with calculations, their shared consciousness running probability matrices. The crystalline Ceruleans behind them refracted light in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Only the humans seemed oddly relaxed, exchanging subtle glances. The simulation's purpose, the commander emphasized, his compound eyes sweeping the audience, is to teach the most difficult lesson in galactic defense, that sometimes victory means accepting significant losses. The Academy record for completion stands at 3 hours and 42 minutes. Sven nudged Diego. 3 hours. We could take a nap and still beat that. Diego suppressed a laugh as the commander's gaze fixed directly on their group. Cadets will enter the simulation in order of academic standing. Team Human will enter at 800 tomorrow. The designation Team Human sent a wave of chittering amusement through several species in the amphitheater. Being named for your planet rather than your tactical specialty was considered mildly insulting, like being introduced by your species classification rather than your name. As the briefing concluded and cadets began filing out, Amara activated her datapad, already downloading the technical specifications of Kaldar's systems. The power grid is fascinating, designed for efficiency, not surge capacity, which means no one's tried to overload it, Maya noted, her tactical mind already formulating possibilities. The humans found their path blocked by a slender figure with iridescent scales and vertical pupils. Cadet Hrill, a young Volante known for questioning established doctrine, studied them with unabashed curiosity. The commander believes this exercise will teach you humility, she said, her melodic voice eerily beautiful, even through the translator. But I studied your species. You evolved as pursuit predators, did you not? Creatures that chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Maya nodded, curious about the Volante's interest. Yes, we're persistence hunters by evolutionary design. T'Prill's inner eyelids flickered, and what humans had learned was a sign of deep thought. Interesting. All other Academy species evolved as either ambush predators or prey. None share your evolutionary history of persistence. Jackson's brow furrowed. What's your point, Cadet T'Prill? Simply that different evolutionary paths create different approaches to obstacles, she replied. The Kaldar simulation was designed by beings who believe patience means waiting for the right moment to strike or hide. Your species seems to define patience differently. As T'Prill departed with a graceful motion, Diego turned to his teammates. Was that supposed to be encouragement? Amara smiled slightly, her fingers already working calculations on her datapad. I think it was recognition. Now let's get to work. We have a siege to break. Maya nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. Not just break. We're going to shatter it completely. Darkness had fallen over the Academy when the 5 humans transformed their shared quarters into a makeshift war room. Standard issue furniture had been pushed against walls to create space in the center where a detailed holographic projection of Kaldar Outpost hovered, casting blue light across their focused faces. The main problem, Maya said, manipulating the projection with practiced gestures, isn't the enemy forces or even the orbital blockade. It's the assumptions built into the scenario itself. Jackson nodded, his military experience evident in his analysis. Every team that's attempted this has played by implicit rules: conserve resources, maintain defensive positions, evacuate small groups when possible. Which guarantees failure, Diego added, surrounded by communication logs from previous simulation attempts. Look at these records. Every team maintains periodic contact with headquarters, begging for reinforcements that never come. They'd waste critical bandwidth and give away their positions. Amara, who had been silent for nearly an hour as she studied the outpost's technical specifications, suddenly looked up with excitement brightening her eyes. The power distribution system is the key. It's designed for efficiency during normal operations, but what if we create an intentional cascade? She tapped her datapad, and the holographic outpost's power grid became visible, a complex network of energy conduits flowing from the central fusion reactor to various systems. Look what happens if we overclock everything simultaneously. Her fingers danced across controls, and the holographic outpost briefly glowed bright before simulated systems collapsed. Total failure, but not before a massive energy surge. A surge we could direct. Maya realized, her tactical mind racing. Sten, who had been quietly examining the shuttle bay schematics, looked up with a gleam in his eye. The evacuation craft aren't just transport. With some reconfigurations, they become weapons platforms. He manipulated the hologram to zoom in on the colony's single shuttle. If we strip life support components and reroute power to the maneuvering thrusters, we can create a delivery system. For what? Jackson asked. For this, Amara replied, pulling up schematics for the outpost's medical imaging equipment. The quantum resonance scanner uses controlled electromagnetic pulses. Uncontrolled, it becomes an EMP device. Throughout the night, the humans refine their plan, arguing points, identifying weaknesses, and running countless simulations. Unlike their academy classmates, who relied on neural uploaders to absorb tactical information during sleep cycles, the humans worked with physical models, animated debates, and rapid iterations. The most critical factor is timing, Maya emphasized, highlighting orbital patterns of enemy ships. We'll have exactly one chance when Sven deploys the EMP. Every action needs to be synchronized. Around the academy, other species placed bets on how quickly the humans would fail. The Vordak's consensus estimated 30 minutes before catastrophic shield failure. The methodical Exarillians calculated the humans might last an hour before depleting critical resources. Will you join the wager pool, Cadet Tipril? Asked a floating crystalline Exarillian as they passed in a corridor. The Violante's scales shimmered in thought. I believe wagering on failure misses the point. Humans come from a world where survival often means embracing chaos rather than controlling it. Their planet taught them different lessons than ours. Poetic, but irrelevant, the Exurlian chimed dismissively. The Kaldar scenario has mathematical certainty built into its parameters. T'Prittl's inner eyelids flickered. Perhaps, but mathematics cannot always account for evolutionary perspective. Back in the human quarters, as Centauri Prime's twin moons reached their zenith, the team had finally completed their plan. It violated every tactical doctrine taught at the academy, and just might work. Get some sleep, Maya told her team as the projection finally winked out, plunging the room into darkness. Tomorrow we change how the academy thinks about impossible problems. And if we fail? Diego asked, voicing the question no one had raised. Jackson's smile was barely visible in the dim light. Then we fail spectacularly on our own terms. Either way, they'll remember us. Within minutes, the exhausted humans had collapsed into brief, efficient sleep cycles, their minds still working through calculations and contingencies even as they rested. The simulation chamber resembled a massive geodesic dome, its interior surface covered with neural responsive technology that created perfect sensory immersion. As the 5 humans approached the entrance at precisely 7:55, they discovered an unusual crowd gathered outside. Faculty members, administrators, and nearly every cadet not currently in class. "Quite an audience for our failure," Jackson remarked quietly, adjusting his simulation interface gear. "Or our success," Maya countered, her expression focused and determined. The chamber's main doors parted with a soft hiss to reveal the control center where technicians prepared the simulation parameters. Commander Xilvax himself stood at the primary console, an unprecedented appearance that caused the humans to exchange glances. The commander rarely observed cadet simulations personally. "Team Human," he acknowledged, compound eyes unreadable. "Are you prepared for the Kaldar simulation?" "We are, Commander," Maya responded formally. The Arcturian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "I should inform you that this simulation has never been completed with more than 60% civilian survival. The Academy record for completion stands at 3 hours and 42 minutes. Diego raised an eyebrow. "We're aware of the historical statistics, sir." "Excellent. Then you understand the value of this exercise, accepting that perfect solutions rarely exist in tactical situations." Maya maintained a neutral expression. "We understand the parameters of the exercise, Commander." Something in her tone caused Xilvax to study her more carefully. His assistant leaned close and chittered something that made the commander's mandibles click more rapidly. "Very well. Take your positions." The observation gallery had filled to capacity. Cadets from 23 different species crowded the tiered seating, their diverse physiologies creating a tapestry of colors, textures, and sounds. Faculty members occupied the privileged front row, datapads ready to record and analyze every decision. T'Pril had arrived early to secure a seat with an unobstructed view of both the simulation platform and the monitoring displays. Beside her, a 6-limbed Vordax collective buzzed with anticipation. "The betting pool has reached 17,000 credits," the Vordax informed her, their hive-mind voice harmonizing perfectly. "Most wager they will fail within 30 minutes. T'Pril's scales shimmered. "And what does the Vordax consensus predict?" 26 minutes until catastrophic shield failure. Their human physiology makes them prone to impulsive decisions when under pressure. As the humans took their positions on the simulation platform, the chamber hushed. The Academy's AI announced in its neutral voice, "Siege of Kaldar simulation commencing. Historical average survival rate, 47%. Historical average completion time, 5 hours, 12 minutes. Commander Xilvax settled into his observation seat. "Now we shall see how these Deathworlders handle true strategic patience," he commented, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent gallery. The simulation engaged with a flash of light that momentarily blinded the observers. When vision cleared, the monitoring displays showed the humans in the command center of Kaldar Outpost. Outside the reinforced walls, enemy forces gathered in intimidating numbers. Orbital scanners showed enemy ships preventing any easy evacuation. The colony's 500 civilians huddled in protective bunkers, while the outpost's defensive systems displayed already depleting energy reserves. The standard protocol, established over decades of Academy training, would begin with a methodical assessment of resources, careful deployment of defensive assets, and establishment of rationing systems to prepare for the long siege ahead. The humans did none of this. Instead, they exploded into coordinated action that left the observers blinking in confusion. Maya issued rapid-fire commands that sent her teammates to different stations. Diego immediately began reconfiguring the outpost's communication arrays. Amara disappeared into the power distribution center. Sven sprinted toward the shuttle bay without a backward glance. Jackson gathered the virtual colonial security forces and began reorganizing them into what appeared to be strike teams. "What are they doing? whispered one of the Arcturian faculty members. "They're supposed to be establishing defensive perimeters." Commander Xilvax leaned forward, his compound eyes fixed on the monitoring displays. "They've completely misunderstood the exercise," he stated, though a note of uncertainty had crept into his translated voice. The simulation timer showed only 3 minutes had elapsed. The observation gallery erupted in a chorus of shocked exclamations as the human strategy unfolded at a pace that left the monitoring systems struggling to track all activities simultaneously. Resource consumption graphs spiked into red warning zones as the outpost's power reserves diminished at rates the simulation had never before recorded. Within the virtual command center, Maya coordinated the team's efforts with precision timing. "Amara, status on power reconfiguration." "Bypassing safety protocols now," Amara replied, her fingers dancing across the engineering console. "Fusion generators operating at 130% capacity. We have 7 minutes before automatic shutdown." Xerlian instructor's crystalline form vibrated with alarm. "The shields will collapse within minutes at that output level," he predicted confidently. "Their strategy violates fundamental resource management principles." In the simulation, Amara had redirected the dangerous energy surge to the defensive shields, not to strengthen them uniformly as doctrine dictated, but to create a pulsing, asymmetrical pattern that confused enemy targeting systems. The shield visualization on the main display showed a strange, flickering barrier that shifted frequencies in seemingly random patterns. Commander Xilvax's compound eyes narrowed. "Interesting. They're sacrificing shield longevity for short-term tactical advantage." Meanwhile, Diego had accessed the communications center and executed a series of commands that baffled the observers. Instead of establishing the expected emergency beacon protocol, he had jammed not only enemy communications, but had somehow spliced into their frequencies. Injecting conflicting orders into enemy command channels, Diego reported to Maya. "Their ground forces are receiving contradictory deployment instructions. Estimate 4 minutes of communication disruption." On the tactical display, the enemy forces surrounding the outpost began to show signs of confusion. Units moved in contradictory patterns, some advancing while others retreated, creating momentary gaps in what should have been an impenetrable perimeter. Jackson had organized the security personnel into small, mobile strike teams that were already exploiting these gaps, not to escape, but to target what appeared to be random enemy positions. "This is reckless," declared one of the senior tactical instructors. "They'll deplete all resources within 30 minutes and be overrun." Prill leaned forward, her scales shifting to a deeper blue that indicated intense concentration. "No, look at the pattern of their strikes. They're not random. They're targeting communication relays." On the largest monitoring display, Sven's actions in the shuttle bay drew everyone's attention. The human pilot had powered up the colony's single evacuation craft, not toward the designated emergency extraction point, but directly at the enemy's command ship in what appeared to be a suicide run. "They're sacrificing their evacuation capability already?" asked a confused Vordax cadet, their hive mind temporarily disrupted by this incomprehensible tactic. T'Pril gestured for silence. "Wait. Watch what happens." The entire gallery held its collective breath as the shuttle accelerated toward the enemy command ship. At the last possible moment, the craft veered sharply away, but not before ejecting a hastily assembled device that Amara had constructed from repurposed medical imaging equipment. The device detonated with an electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disabled the enemy's orbital superiority. Dozens of enemy ships drifted powerless, their weapons and targeting systems offline. In the control center, Maya's expression shifted from intense concentration to the satisfied smile of a predator whose trap had just sprung perfectly. "Phase 2, she ordered through the comms. "Execute now." Commander Xilvax rose from his seat, mandibles clicking rapidly. "What just happened?" "Check the simulation parameters." The technicians frantically reviewed the system. "Parameters are standard, Commander. They've just found variables no one considered important before." On the main display, The simulation timer showed that barely 7 minutes had elapsed. The 5 humans had already fundamentally altered the battlefield in ways no previous team had even attempted. "Impossible," whispered an instructor. "They're turning a siege defense into an offensive operation." T'Pril's inner eyelids flickered with something that might have been satisfaction. Not impossible, just human. The human strategy wasn't merely unorthodox. It fundamentally rejected the premise of the simulation itself. The siege of Kaldar wasn't designed to be broken. It was designed to teach acceptance of limitations. Yet the 5 cadets from Earth had decided those limitations were merely suggestions. With the enemy's orbital capabilities temporarily disabled by Sven's improvised EMP and their ground forces thrown into disarray by Dievo's communication warfare, Maya initiated the next phase of their plan. The colony's defensive turrets, recalibrated by Amara to fire at twice their rated capacity, delivered precision strikes against key enemy positions. Overriding targeting protocols, Maya announced, hands flying across the command console. "Jackson, deploy strike teams Alpha and Beta to these coordinates." The simulation displayed a tactical map where Jackson's security teams moved with practiced efficiency toward seemingly random locations, until T'Pril suddenly understood their purpose. "They're targeting the enemy's backup communication nodes," she explained to bewildered classmates. "They're extending the disruption from the EMP." In the observation gallery, the stunned silence had transformed into a buzz of disbelief mixed with grudging admiration. The simulation's timer showed less than 9 minutes had elapsed. "This isn't possible," Commander Xilvax muttered, mandibles clicking rapidly. "The simulation is designed to be unsolvable through offensive action. The enemy forces outnumber the defenders 20-1. Yet the evidence contradicted everything the Academy taught about siege warfare. The humans weren't trying to conserve resources. They were spending everything in one coordinated, all-or-nothing offensive that exploited weaknesses no other species had identified. Sven had returned the damaged but functional shuttle to the outpost and begun a procedure that violated every evacuation protocol in the Academy handbook. Instead of loading small groups of priority personnel as regulations dictated, he was reconfiguring the shuttle's interior to accommodate more passengers by removing non-essential systems. "Evac shuttle ready for mass loading," Sven reported. "Estimate capacity increased to 68 passengers per trip." "Acknowledged," Maya responded. "Diego, start bringing civilians up in groups of 70. Priority to children and medical cases." The first group of civilians moved through the outpost's corridors, guided by Jackson's remaining security teams through routes that seemed dangerously exposed, until observers noticed that the humans had timed the movements precisely to coincide with gaps in enemy coverage caused by their earlier disruptions. "They're treating resources as expendable," noted one faculty member with a mixture of horror and fascination. "No," corrected T'Pril, her understanding growing clearer. "They're treating the outpost itself as expendable. They're saving what matters, the people." The humans had reframed the entire scenario. To them, victory wasn't measured in infrastructure preserved or resources managed. It was measured in lives saved. This perspective, shaped by their evolution on a planet where adaptation meant survival, allowed them to see opportunities invisible to species raised on Academy doctrine. As the simulation timer passed 11 minutes, an alert appeared on the main monitoring display, one that had never activated in the simulation's century-long history. "Civilian evacuation in progress. 13% complete." Commander Xilvax rose from his seat, his exoskeleton clicking in agitation. "They're actually evacuating civilians. How is this possible?" "Sir," reported a technician, "they've created a temporary safe corridor using the shield fluctuations Cadet Okafor implemented. The irregular pattern is confusing enemy targeting systems just long enough for the shuttle to navigate through." Another technician added, "And they've repurposed the outpost's weather modification equipment to create atmospheric interference that's further disrupting enemy sensors." The gallery watched as the shuttle, loaded beyond recommended capacity, successfully navigated through the chaotic battlefield and reached a position of relative safety, then returned for another load of civilians. Each trip seemed to defy probability, threading through gaps in enemy coverage that existed for mere seconds. "They're not accepting the parameters of the siege," T'Pril observed. "They're changing them entirely." A faculty member shook their head in disbelief. But the simulation was designed to be unwinnable through evacuation. The variables simply don't allow it. T'Pril's scales shimmered with excitement. Perhaps those variables didn't account for human ingenuity. As the simulation timer hit the 18-minute mark, the observation gallery watched in stunned silence as the evacuation percentage climbed at an unprecedented rate. 47%, 53%, 61%, already surpassing the historical record. The human strategy had evolved from merely unexpected to seemingly impossible. "Final evacuation group boarding now," Sven reported from the shuttle bay, his voice calm despite the chaos surrounding him. 91% of civilians secured. In the power distribution center, Amara's hands moved with surgical precision across control panels never designed for what she was attempting. Fusion generators at critical mass. Containment fields holding but degrading. "We have 4 minutes before catastrophic failure." "Perfect timing," Maya responded from the command center. "Diego, status on enemy communications." "Still scrambled, but they're adapting. I estimate 2 minutes before they reestablish orbital coordination." Commander Xilvax's compound eyes hadn't blinked in several minutes as he absorbed the unfolding scenario. "They're deliberately destabilizing the fusion reactors," he realized suddenly. "This isn't a mistake. It's intentional sabotage of their own position." Exerlian instructor's crystalline form vibrated in alarm. "They're destroying the outpost. This is failure by any standard." Yet the monitoring systems told a different story. The civilian evacuation percentage had reached 96%, with the remaining 4% comprising the security teams still maintaining the chaotic defense that made evacuation possible. Maya's voice came clearly through the command center comms. "Detonation sequence aligned with evacuation corridor. All civilian transports. Adjust vector to optimal thrust envelope in 5, 4, 3. On the tactical display, the final shuttle, carrying the last civilians and Jackson's remaining security teams, launched from the bay. Its trajectory seemed bizarrely wrong, heading not away from the enemy forces, but on a course parallel to them. "What are they doing?" gasped an instructor. "That flight path takes them directly through concentrated enemy fire." T'Pril leaned forward, scales shifting to a deep purple of intense focus. "Wait, they're timing something." In the power distribution center, Amara executed her final commands. Containment fields disengaging in coordinated sequence. Primary explosion in 3, 2, 1. The resulting detonation wasn't a simple reactor failure. It was precisely calculated to channel the explosive force in a directional pattern. The outpost's fusion core erupted in a blindingly bright cascade that eliminated the remaining enemy ground forces while simultaneously creating an expanding plasma wave. This wave, carefully shaped by Amara's reconfiguration of the containment fields, provided thrust assistance to the departing shuttle, accelerating it beyond the effective range of the recovering enemy orbital forces. The observation gallery watched in disbelief as the shuttle, riding the edge of the plasma wave like a surfboard on its tsunami, achieved velocity that should have been impossible for its design specifications. Maya, monitoring from a command console aboard the shuttle, gave her final order. "Execute terminal sequence." The outpost's remaining infrastructure detonated in a precisely timed chain of explosions that created an expanding debris field, not random destruction, but a calculated pattern that formed a barrier shielding the escaping shuttles from enemy targeting systems. "They've weaponized the very outpost they were supposed to defend," whispered Commander Xilvax, his translator unable to fully convey the complex emotions in his native speech. The Academy's monitoring system calculated the results in flashing blue text: 100% civilian survival, 0% infrastructure preservation. Total mission time, 20 minutes and 17 seconds. The simulation ended with a gentle chime that seemed absurdly anticlimactic given what had just occurred. The 5 human cadets emerged from the simulation chamber to find hundreds of stunned alien faces staring at them. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to outrage to reluctant admiration. "Did we do something wrong?" asked Jackson, looking genuinely puzzled by their reaction. Maya surveyed the silent gallery, her expression professionally neutral despite the triumph evident in her posture. "I believe we've completed the exercise, Commander." Zilvax's compound eyes fixed on the humans with an inscrutable alien gaze. For perhaps the first time in his long career, the Academy's headmaster found himself completely at a loss for words. The following day, the Academy's Grand Hall hosted an unprecedented special assembly. Every faculty member and cadet attended, the air thick with anticipation as Commander Zilvax ascended to the central platform. The 5 human cadets stood at attention in the front row, their expressions professionally neutral despite the whispers that followed them everywhere since yesterday's simulation. For 100 years, Commander Zilvax began, his translated voice resonating through the chamber. The siege of Kaldar simulation has taught generations of cadets the same lesson: that sometimes victory means accepting losses, that resources must be preserved for the greater strategic picture, that patience outweighs aggression. His compound eyes scanned the assembly before settling on the humans. The silence in the hall was absolute. Yesterday, these cadets from Earth challenged a century of tactical doctrine. Their approach violated every principle we teach about siege defense. They sacrificed the outpost entirely, an outcome that, by our traditional metrics, represents catastrophic failure. Maya stood slightly straighter, chin raised, ready to defend their approach if necessary. Beside her, Jackson maintained the stoic expression perfected during his Special Forces training. Amara's fingers fidgeted slightly at her sides, doubtless running calculations in her mind. Sven and Diego exchanged the briefest glance, a silent question about where this speech was heading. The commander's exoskeleton straightened as he continued. After extensive review, the Academy Tactical Council has reached a conclusion that will fundamentally alter our training protocols. A murmur passed through the assembly as species from across the galaxy shifted uncomfortably. Many had evolved on worlds where patience and conservation were necessary for survival. Humans, products of a chaotic, unpredictable death world, had developed a fundamentally different calculus of value. Team Human's solution has revealed a critical blind spot in our tactical thinking. The commander gestured to the main display, which showed a side-by-side comparison between traditional approaches and the humans' method. Our doctrine emphasized preserving infrastructure at the cost of accepting civilian casualties. Their strategy prioritized civilian survival at the cost of infrastructure. The statistical comparison was stark. Best previous result: 60% civilian survival, 35% infrastructure preservation. Human result: 100% civilian survival, 0% infrastructure preservation. T'Pril rose from her seat with uncharacteristic boldness. "Commander, if I may, I've been studying Earth's historical conflicts. Their planet's history contains numerous examples of cities destroyed yet rebuilt stronger, of civilizations continuing despite catastrophic losses of infrastructure. Their saying, 'Where there's life, there's hope,' reflects an evolutionary perspective shaped by their world's volatility." The commander's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement. Indeed, the Academy's mission is to prepare defenders for all threats our galaxy might face. To that end, the simulation parameters will be updated to recognize multiple victory conditions, including what will now be termed the Earth Doctrine, prioritizing life preservation over infrastructure. His compound eyes fixed on the 5 humans once more. Cadet Chin, Cadet Reed, Cadet Okafor, Cadet Lindholm, Cadet Rice. Your team has earned highest marks and special commendation. Moreover, you have reminded this institution that adaptability is the true hallmark of effective defense. As the assembly concluded, the humans received congratulations from species that had previously avoided them. Even the Xerillians, normally dismissive of inefficient approaches, acknowledged the elegance of their solution. Commander Xilvax approached Maya privately as the hall emptied. "The Academy has requested additional human cadets for next year's class," he informed her, his translated voice carrying a new note of respect. "Your species brings perspectives we did not know we needed." Maya smiled slightly. "Thank you, Commander. Though I should warn you, we have many more surprises to offer." The commander's mandibles twitched in what humans were beginning to recognize as amusement. "Of that, Cadet Chen, I have no doubt."